I've been on a bit of a kick lately talking about exposure aids when shooting video. Last time I looked at Canon's Zebra implementation, which I'm going to argue is something of a mixed bag. This time we're going to look at another one of those aids, False Color. In this video, we're going to look at the False Color exposure aid found on Canon's latest hybrid cameras. Specifically, these include the R1, the R5 Mark II, the R6 Mark II, the R8, and the R50V. Now yes, these cinema cameras also have a false color mode, but that is a video on its own right that will be separate from this one. Now in this video, we are going to specifically look at how to enable the false color overlay, what settings it conflicts with, and when it can and can't be used. And finally, we'll talk about a little bit about how to actually use it in sort of a practical sense. Now, if you're new to all of this, you may be asking yourself, what exactly is false color and why would you want to use it? Put simply, false color is an exposure aid that colors your live image based on the brightness levels that are seen instead of the actual color that exists in real life. Now, looking around the industry, there are several different ways that false color information can be displayed. These range from the simplest, which just provides IRE information, to gamma-corrected exposure zones that match the format and gamma that you're shooting in. Canon's implementation follows Arri's pattern, including both the coloration and the use of both exposure index dependent and independent zones. Now, before we take a look at the false color system and how to interpret it, we need to start by talking a little bit about how to enable and disable the false color overlay. On Canon cameras that support false color, there are three ways to toggle these settings. These are through the menus, using a custom button function, and with a quick control menu customization. Now for the EOS R8 and R6 Mark II, the false color menu settings are found under the False Color Set menu on page 7 of the red shooting menu. On the EOS R5, R1, and R50V, the false color menu entry is found again under False Color Set, but this time it's on page 8, or the Assist Shooting page of the red shooting menu section. Of course, both of these are in video mode. On opening the False Color Set menu, you will find two entries, False Color and False Color Index. Now, to enable or disable the false color mode on your camera, select the false color entry and then change it to either on or off, respectively. Now, the second way to toggle the false color overlay is using a button function. False color can be configured to any of the configurable buttons except the shutter release, the movie record button, the multi-controller, and the flashes menu direct button. Now on the R6 Mark II and R8, this is done through the Customize Buttons menu found on page 3 of the orange Custom Functions menu section. And of course on the R5 Mark II, R1, and R50V, this is done through the Customize Buttons for Shooting entry found on the Customize Controls When Shooting page, or page 1 of the green Control Customization menu section. Now, the final option is to add an entry to your Quick Control menu to toggle the false color overlay through the live Quick Control overlay. Now, on the R6 Mark II and R8, this is done through the Customize Quick Control entry, which is found on page 8 of the red shooting menu. Again, this has to be done in video mode. And on the R5 Mark II, R1, and R50V, you can use the same Customize Quick Control menu, only this time it's found on the Shutter Control / Assist Shooting page, or page 7 of the red menu section in video mode. Now, in either of these cases, once false color is added to the Quick Control menu, it can be toggled by selecting it using the multi-controller or Quick Control dial, and then using the main dial to change the state. So now that we know how to toggle the false color overlay, there are a few cases you won't be able to use it in, and some features that you can't use while it's enabled. To start with, if you're an HDR or log shooter, the false color overlay cannot be combined with the HDR/Canon log view assist function when that's enabled. This is the view assistant mode that provides a corrected image when using the custom picture image engine so that you can see something that's not all washed out. You can, however, combine false color with the standard HDR shooting mode, parentheses PQ, but you can't combine it with the HDR movie mode. Now, additionally, false color cannot be used with dual shooting, so that's when you can shoot video and stills at the same time, or auto lighting optimizer. Now finally, since false color is an overlay effect, it cannot be combined with other overlay effects like manual focus peaking or zebras. Now, false color information is also controlled by the HDMI display setting, specifically where it's output and rendered. When this setting is set to external monitor, the camera will render false color information on the HDMI output and therefore the attached monitor. So that's something important to know if you are using this mode. However, when the HDMI display setting is set to the internal plus external setting, the camera will only render the false color overlay on the camera's internal display. So that's either the LCD or EVF. The HDMI port will remain clean. Now, Canon's false color overlay uses a system similar to Arri's false color pattern, though Canon doesn't quite give the same description, nor do they provide as complete of documentation on the levels and calculations that they use as Arri does, but it's basically the same thing. The false color system shows exposure levels by recoloring the image based on the brightness of that area. Canon, like Arri, uses 6 colors: red, yellow, pink, green, blue, and purple or magenta to indicate exposure levels. Red indicates that the white clipping point is approximately being reached. Yellow is a pre-clipping warning that occurs just below the red indication and about a half a stop below the white clipping point based on my testing. Pink areas are 1 stop brighter than 18%, so they're 36% exposure reflectance. Green areas are at 18%. Blue areas are just above the black clipping point, and finally, purple areas are at the black clipping point or the noise floor in the image. Now, the rest of the image, areas that don't fall into these zones, will be displayed in grayscale as they would normally appear. Now, while it's useful to commit this information to memory, Canon does include a table of these levels and the colors that they're associated with in the camera. It's actually the second setting in the false color menu, false color index. Now, additionally, if you have false color added to your quick control screen, you can access this table, specifically the menu and this table, by selecting the false color entry and then pressing Info, then selecting the false color index from the menu page that comes up. Now, unlike zebra stripes, the false color values are corrected for your camera's selected gamma curve. That is, you don't have to calculate or change additional settings to get accurate color or exposure information. If you're interested in a detailed dive into the precision of the false color ranges and what the levels actually translate to, I've done that in the version of this video for the R5C, so check it out. It's linked in all the usual places. Now that brings me to the last bit of this video and the more practical discussion on the false color system. Now to start with, the false color system is much more accurate than the zebra stripe system that I talked about in the previous video. For example, there isn't anywhere near a stop or even a half stop of error in the 18 or 36% zones. In fact, the range is small enough that 8th stop fine adjustments noticeably change what's highlighted at the 18% and 18+1% stop zones. Now, like most exposure tools, the false color system can be used various ways depending on your objectives. To start with, the red and yellow zones warn of imminent and actual clipping. You can, of course, use this to adjust your exposure so that the brightest areas are in the yellow zone, ensuring that clipping and the associated image quality losses aren't actually occurring. Conversely, the green and pink zones for 18% and 36% are intended as aids for exposing for skin tones. Well, at least light skin tones. Generally speaking, light skin tones should be placed somewhere between 18 and 36%, or one stop over 18%, depending, of course, on the actual tonality of the skin. Now, of course, what makes this more challenging than, it arguably needs to be is that between that 18 and 36% level, there isn't any false color information, so you don't know how close you are to actually putting things where they are. However, in practice, since you won't have a perfectly flat, even exposure across your subject's skin tones, what you end up looking for is highlights in the pink +1 stop zone and dark areas in the green 18% zone coloring, and that should get you pretty close. So that takes care of light skin tones. What about dark skin tones? Well, in many cases, they should be exposed in the 9% or one stop under 18% to 18% range. Now, unfortunately, Canon, like Arri, doesn't include a -1 stop zone in their false color system, so you can't quite get this as nailed in as you can for lighter skin tones. However, one workaround for this limitation is to use the fact that, again, your talent's skin won't be evenly lit. In this case, you can use the green 18% zone on highlights, and that should help you get the correct exposure, or at least close to it. Now, of course, all of this comes with the big caveat that everyone's skin tones are different, so there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Like most things in photography and life in general, practice and experience are necessary to get the most out of a tool like false color. Moreover, as long as you're not blowing out important highlight informations, it generally is going to be better to overexpose than underexpose, and this will tend to lean that way a little bit. Overexposed images can always be brought back in post without excessive noise showing up, but underexposed images that need to be brought up will obviously have a lot more noise in them, and that's not desirable. So let me wrap this up with a couple of closing thoughts. To start with, I think Canon went in the right direction with their false color scale. Since the Arri style zone system Canon uses is all over the place, it's familiar to a lot of people. On top of that, it uses exposure index dependent or gamma corrected ranges, the 18 and 36%, instead of just linear digital data, and therefore it provides useful reflectances regardless of what gamma curve you're shooting in on your camera. Now, with that said, it really would be nice to have a -1 stop color and maybe a bit more information between the -1, 0, and +1 stop over 18% range to make it a bit easier to deal with setting exposures using skin tones, but what's there is also pretty standard across the industry, and a lot of people get by just fine. Now, the short of it, though, is that Canon's false color implementation is, at least in my opinion, somewhat easier to work with than their zebra stripe implementation. You certainly don't have to calibrate it when you change gamma curves, and the 18% green zone is automatically set to the right level based on the current curve. I also find the colors are actually easier for me to read at quick glance compared to the zebra slope. If I see yellow or red, that area is clipping. Green and pink is right around where my subject should be exposed, and I don't have to kind of try to determine, oh, is this an upsloping slope or a downsloping slope? About the only real problem I have with the false color implementation is that, for some reason, it can't be used with the camera's view assist feature. I don't really see why Canon couldn't have written the firmware so that false color either bypassed the view assist processing and was overlaid on top of that, or even more usefully, just toggled view assist off when you enabled false color and then toggled it back on when you disabled false color. Since you're not going to shoot in false color, you're going to use it to set and check exposures and then go back to something that's more reasonable. That said, I hope you found this useful, or at least interesting. If you did, let me know by hitting that like button. Also, if this kind of thing seems like it might be your kind of thing, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Finally, if you'd like to help and support this channel, you can help us for free by liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and leaving a comment with your experiences. Likewise, you can support us by hitting that thanks button or buying yourself something you've always wanted from one of the affiliate links in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.